An interesting backstory.
I think it's important that everybody knows about the Wizard of Oz.
A professional with decades of experience in her field.
I'm a psychotherapist who works pretty much exclusively with law enforcement officers, as well as other first responders.
Strong opinions and a definite point of view.
What people see on the streets, this job, is not normal.
Brutally honest and funny.
When I get a call in the middle of the night and they've been drinking beer, they're normally crying over a relationship. When they're drinking Jack, they get on the phone and they start off with, "Hey babe."
She identifies problems, probes, pokes, and makes you think.
So if something happens to your family, which is truly your biggest fear, and you haven't thought about every single potential of what could go wrong, then you feel like you failed.
She has her own special style.
You're either part of the problem or part of the solution. Pick a side.
Welcome to StephTherapy911 with Stephanie Samuels.
So hello and welcome to StephTherapy911 with Stephanie Samuels. Today I am truly honored to have Sherri Martin on my show, who is the Director of Wellness Services for the National FOP. And although I have 2 pages, or actually a little over a page of a bio, I think the most important part of what we're going to be talking about today stems from an amazing background. That kind of the running joke that I have with Sherri is that she and I met at a conference that we can quickly address. But anyway, that wasn't what was important. We shared a lift together, not having a clue who each other was. But I believe she didn't have a phone. There's a little something going on anyway. I thought I should take care of her. So that was it. And then met at other conferences, and just what the National FOP is doing is so amazing, because so often you hear these top organizations that represent so many law enforcement officers, that they talk the talk but they don't walk the walk, that they talk about the mental health, they talk about the importance, but they don't back it with the services. So it is just absolutely incredible to be able to see what National FOP is doing, to have the woman who is leading the charge for the FOP and her background. So I'm going to hand this over Sherri so that she can talk. She's totally uncomfortable talking about herself, so I have tasked her with this before we went live, that she needs to, because to really understand how she was chosen, the success of this, and her absolutely getting it on so many different levels, from the law enforcement side and the clinical side, is just awesome. So thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. I'm honored to be here as well. And your introduction is very flattering. I appreciate that. I really just see myself as, somebody who's following their passion and kind of the place that they were meant to be in life. And, I hope that everybody out there finds that at some point in their career, because it's truly rewarding to be in the place where I am now, and to be doing the work that we're doing with the FOP. So going way back, I am your average, cop, to be honest. Military kid, military brat. So I moved around the U.S. when I was a kid, but I spent most of my life in the southeastern states of the United States. And when I went to college, right after high school, I thought I wanted to be a judge. I envisioned myself sitting on the Supreme Court one day. And once I got into college, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and decided to major in psychology. And I think at the time I was along the lines thinking, big picture, forensic psychology, things like that, which I think a lot of college kids think that, that'd be a really cool job. I'm going to go be a criminal profiler or something like that. Quickly learned that, that's a pretty narrow field in psychology, being a criminal profiler. But nevertheless, got that degree in psychology and found that I really enjoyed psychology. But then I also learned that you can't really go far in the field of psychology without further degrees after college. And after 4 years of being broke and doing nothing but studying, I decided I didn't want to go to school anymore at that time. So I had been an intern. I went to school at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And Chapel Hill is a small town that's kind of built around the university there. And when I was at the university, I interned at the local police department, Chapel Hill Police Department. So it's a small agency. About the time, I think we had about 100 officers there. I'm not sure what their size is now.
Why did you
And
pick that as an internship?
because the same thing, I was still interested in the forensic side of things. And
Right.
so they had a lone crime scene person there. A lot of agencies have a whole department of crime scene folks. They had one guy, Mr. Austin, and so he allowed me to come in and intern with him, and it was a great experience for me. And so what ended up happening is because I had been an intern at Chapel Hill Police Department, that was a logical place for me to go and look for a job. I knew I needed a job because I wasn't going to school, and I needed a job. So I went to Chapel Hill Police Department, started there in my law enforcement career. I spent about a year in Chapel Hill, and my brother, who also was for a short time a police officer, was at the time living in Charleston because he had been in South Carolina because he had been in the military as well, in the Air Force in Charleston, had left the military, did a stint with EMS, became a police officer, and he said, "Hey, Charleston's a great place. You should really come to Charleston. You should move here." And so I did. So I then joined the Charleston Police Department way back in 1997. And I spent 18 years in Charleston in my career there in law enforcement. And the majority of my career there was in the patrol division. I always found that I like patrol work the best. I think it's a number of things. Short attention span, for one. I didn't have the patience really to stick with, let's say, like detective work where you have to follow a case for weeks and weeks and weeks. I like to be where the action was on the street. And so I enjoyed patrol work. And Charleston's an interesting place because it's now it's at the time when I went there in '97, it was still an undiscovered gem, really. But Charleston now is become one of the most popular cities in the United States, and so it's growing now by leaps and bounds. But I had the opportunity of watching that transition happen. And when I first moved to Charleston, there were still lots of parts of Charleston that were pretty rough. And I spent a good bit of time working the rougher neighborhoods in Charleston. And so I saw a good bit of action in that patrol work. I did do some other assignments while I was at Charleston Police Department. I was in the warrants division for a while. But then I promoted up through the ranks through patrol. Found that I still say the best job I ever had in law enforcement, at least, was being a patrol sergeant. I enjoyed working hands-on with the squads that I worked with the guys and girls, and actually doing the work, interacting with public, and doing that what I call real police work out there on patrol. So
In my practice, that is the most common thing that people tell me that have made rank above sergeant, no matter how high they've gone, including chief, that the best time they had was as a sergeant. So.
Absolutely, it's the best of both worlds because you still get to do police work.
Yep.
You could still go take calls as a sergeant in most cases. You could still do the police work, but you don't have to deal with, let's face it, the mundane calls that you don't want to go to.
Yeah.
And you get to still interact with officers, doing the teaching and sharing your knowledge and experience with them. When you get above sergeant, you feel like you're out of touch with it. And so I know that because I ended up getting promoted to lieutenant in Charleston, and was the evening shift watch commander there for a couple of years, where, at the Charleston Police Department is a pretty established, they're a very progressive organization. And so there's lots of special units, special assignments there, you know, from K9 to dive teams to harbor patrol to, you know, special aggressive crime squads, lots of things there. And so as the evening shift watch commander, I supervised all of that. And, you know, so
department was it?
I'm sorry.
How big of a department?
At the time I was there, it was about 450 sworn officers. I'm not sure now. I think it's a good bit larger now. Yeah. So, lots of things going on, and you know, so the way that department is structured is that the majority of the command staff there works daytime hours. So in the evening shift time, I was basically it. I was the highest ranking person working, so I was responsible for everything going on with that police department. So it was an interesting switch of perspective to, you know, having been the person out there doing all that work to, you know, having to manage sometimes several critical incidents at once, several scenes at once in a pretty widespread geographic area. You know, I now live in Connecticut, where if you travel 6 miles, you've gone through 2 or 3 towns. Charleston is many square miles large. So, you know, I had to move around the area quite a bit sometimes. So that was an interesting perspective to have, to be on that side of it and to, you know, to try to think of things as a commander when you're used to thinking of things as a police officer, a hands-on supervisor. So good experience. You know, and one thing I'll back up just a little bit. When I was working as a patrol sergeant, there was a point in my career in law enforcement where I thought, you know, 2 things. One day, I'm not going to want to do this. I'm going to be too old. You know, I'm going to be at retirement age. And not for nothing, I did go to school for something else. So I probably ought to do something to prepare. So I went back to school as a sergeant. There in Charleston, there's the Citadel, which is the Military University of South Carolina. They have a graduate program there. So I enrolled in the clinical counseling program there at the Citadel, went to school while I was working full time as a police sergeant, which was manageable until I got to internship. And because there's a full length practicum and internship built into that program. It's a pretty quality program. So during my internship year, which I did at the VA hospital in Charleston, I was trading all my shifts for midnight shifts and working at the hospital during the day and then going to midnight shifts or evening shifts and then back to the VA in the morning. So but the experience of going through that program was outstanding. I had fantastic professors, and the internship that I did was on a research project that was working on teletherapy. So I was doing actual in-person therapy with clients at the VA, and the clientele that I had were suffering from PTSD and trauma-related symptoms, as well as some of them with clinical depression. So we did a lot of treating of those things in person, but then I would also have clients that I was seeing over teletherapy. So this is way before COVID times. This is way back around 2012 that I was doing this. And what the research was trying to was to compare outcomes between teletherapy and in-person therapy. And you know, the point is that if we can conduct teletherapy and have the same outcome that we can if we do in-person therapy, then we can do therapy with soldiers that are in theater overseas real time, so that they can benefit from therapy while they're actually overseas in conflict. So that was a great experience as well. I learned a lot, and even after my internship finished and I had completed all my hours, I continued to work at the VA on that project for a while, just because I enjoyed that work so much.
And is there an outcome to that? I assume there is an
outcome. There is, and I don't know what it is. I didn't follow up to find out. I should find out, because it would be interesting to know.
Particularly now. So let me tell you, because this becomes really quite relevant in what's going on today. So when you have an officer who, for us, what we'll call cop line, and they state that they are in Oklahoma, but we don't have culturally competent therapists, let's say, near them, it would allow us to potentially refer out of state, because
Absolutely.
right now there's licensing laws that are governing um, being able to see people out of state. What's been able to help is if they're in Oklahoma, we can find somebody culturally competent. They could be 4 hours away though, because of the state. But as long as they're willing to do, the meetings via telehealth. But I would love personally to see what they said, to really be able to push that, because then for us, here in New Jersey, it also becomes a legislative push
Sure.
of being able to keep telehealth in place and the benefits, and then really, once again, impacting. So incredible study and incredible information.
Yeah, you bet. And now that you mentioned that, I'm going to follow up with that and see if I can find out what became of that. It may still be ongoing, to be honest. But I would like to know myself. That's especially it's relevant to current situation.
So
Absolutely.
relevant now. That would be great. And even if they don't have the final results, they should have, marks that they have met that we'll
Right.
see. Because if they know it's not working, they'll kill the research, kind of like cancer research. If they find that they have like a 90% cure on a research project, then it completely redoes the protocols before that. If they're finding that people are dying at greater lengths than the traditional stuff, they stop the research because it's not working. Who
Right.
wants to fund stuff? So it'd be really interesting, because you'll know just by, even if it's going on, then we know it certainly is positive enough that somebody's going to continue to fund this. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
that'd be wonderful, sure. That absolutely be awesome.
Good stuff. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and then while this is all going on with my law enforcement career and my education, I got involved in the FOP way back when I moved to Charleston. So way back in '97, I started being an active member of the FOP, and then I had such an interest in the work that the FOP was doing and the mission and the point of the FOP that I really got involved in that.
On an e-board level, on a what level? So go ahead.
Yeah, so at the beginning, obviously I was just a member, but then I got into leadership in the FOP. First on the local lodge level, I was local lodge officer for a while, and then sat on the state board in South Carolina for a while. I was the South Carolina state treasurer, and then the South Carolina state vice president, and then life intervened. So my husband, who's also
Ah,
a career law enforcement officer and also an FOP member, and we met during an FOP conference at some point during my career. We were friends for a long time, and then eventually our friendship became more than a friendship, and so that's how I ended up in Connecticut. So when I left South Carolina, I was a lieutenant in the Charleston Police Department. I had completed my master's degree in counseling and was doing some work in counseling there at the VA, and was the sitting state vice president of South Carolina State Lodge. So I moved then to Connecticut, got back into law enforcement here in Connecticut as a patrol officer. And, it was a cool thing because my husband was finishing his first law enforcement career. He's retired and back to work at another agency. And so we both kind of started over at the same time. We both had been lieutenants in our previous agencies, and we both went back to patrol in a new agency at about the same time. So you imagine 240 somethings both trying to navigate shift work and midnight shift over again, and being newlyweds and all the things that came along with that. So there we were. So he's still in law enforcement. He's now sergeant for the second time. And and then, once I moved to Connecticut, I, of course, remained involved in the FOP, both at the state level and on a national level at the time, because Chuck Canterbury, who's the former past president, who's the immediate past president of the FOP, was a mentor of mine. And I had for years run his campaigns for national office. So I had a lot of experience in the FOP. I knew a lot of FOP leaders around the country from that experience. And I have always had a personal love for the FOP because of what it stands for. In law enforcement, we know there's such a brotherhood and a sisterhood, and the FOP has always bolstered that. What the FOP looks like is different in different places. So, for example, coming from the South, there's not much union or organized labor among law enforcement in the South. I think Florida, Texas may be some of the only places that they actually have organized labor and unions in law enforcement. But folks in other parts of the country, the FOP is their union. They do their bargaining for them on work contracts. And I didn't have really a lot of knowledge of that, because coming from South Carolina, the FOP is more of an advocacy and a fraternal organization. We do the kind of, down south, we did the kind of things where, we support members when they're going through a tough time. We had lobbyists that lobbied state legislature to influence legislation that would affect law enforcement, but there were no, bargaining for labor rights or anything like that down south. So it's a different ball game here in New England. There's a lot more labor influence, labor involvement up here in New England. So I learned about that, and now sit as the second vice president on the state board of the Connecticut State Lodge. I'm proud and happy to say, and I've learned a great deal about the other missions of the FOP. But to me, for the biggest part of my FOP career, it was about supporting each other and being there for each other in times of crisis.
As I'm listening to you talk, I'm going to take you back to the police stuff. But before I do, as I'm listening to you, one of the things that I have truly cherished with the FOP. So I've been writing a Dear Steph column in New Jersey it's been just about over 20 years now. And one of the things that just has really stayed with me is their inclusiveness, is how you have retired members that are absolutely active.
Oh, yeah.
How they are welcomed, how even though you can have officers affiliated with other unions or organizations, they still welcome them. Whereas here in New Jersey, that is not the case. It is absolutely horrendous. Had an officer who ended up being harassed, and his brother had died in the line of duty, and that the only thing that the union he belonged to cared about was, you're being interviewed by the FOP paper, are you a member, because you can't have a dual membership, rather than really being able to commend him for what he was doing.
That's a shame.
So it is. So and now listening to you, you actually confirmed on a deeper level. So what you told me was, or what you told everybody, was that you had a really good relationship with Chuck Canterbury, who is the past sitting president. So a lot of times you find that presidents that then end up beating the incumbent literally wipe out anybody who is affiliated. And they literally take some of the best people, and out of a whole lot of different issues, end up saying no. And so it really speaks so highly of the current president, Pat Yos, who has been amazing, to once again look at all these people as people, not not dividing them up into friends, foes, or whatever. Is who's the best person in these positions. I don't give a shit who they support or who. That's not what this is about. Who are the best? Because the FOP is about getting the best people and the right people in the positions. And like I said, though it's certainly awkward meeting. I mean, you sat at a table for for a cops conference where they brought people together that are in the here and now and in the know, and they believe are going to try and help law enforcement, and that's where we met. And then you and I testified. But it really shows the importance of the FOP, of this national organization that has said, we are picking the best. And we're just not talking about wellness. We're going to make sure that happens. and then reading your bio. And that's what I said. I wasn't going to read your bio because you needed to talk your bio. Once you read it, it's like, this is absolutely the person, not the woman, not the man, the individual that we want at these tables and in this position, because it has nothing to do with your sex. It has to do with your background,
Yeah.
and being able to move up through the ranks, being able to see things, to be able to be educated, to understand, and then to have such a unique internship with the VA.
Hmm.
So one of the things I was questioning, you mentioned that you're an Army brat.
Yeah. Air Force, actually. Air Force brat.
So I said Army because I was going to say military brat, except my daughter's in the Army, so I'm automatically going Army. So Air Force brat, dad and mom, or just dad?
Just my dad. I guess you
Um,
could say, though, once your spouse is in the military, so are you. But yeah, just my dad.
did he see combat?
Yes, actually, he went to Vietnam. So my dad is a proud Vietnam vet.
Thank him for his service. And
Yeah,
though we're
you
taking
bet.
this, yesterday was Veterans Day, so
Yeah.
um, PTSD in the house ever talked about?
Yeah, no. And I think that my dad, if he has suffered any PTSD, I think it's become, it wasn't ever apparent, to my brother and I. I think there are some things, now that I'm educated about PTSD and the symptoms of it, I can see some things like the short temper, some of those other things. I don't think that he was ever, at least if he was, I was not aware of him having any re-experiencing, maybe some hypervigilance, but I think more of the other things that come along with it, the anger, um, the shortness of patience and things like that. I can see that sometimes. My mother will complain that he has some of those symptoms, but I think that's more of her, being my mom. So, but yeah, no, I mean, it wasn't, let's be honest, it wasn't even something anybody talked about. If
Right.
people even knew what it was,
Right. Well, going back into the 60s, so I think it was combat neurosis, shell shock, combat neurosis, and then post traumatic stress disorder didn't hit really our diagnostic manuals until 1980s. So
right.
so it wouldn't have been, but there's just a question, kind of in looking back, because you're right, it would have been more of a retrospect than it
Yeah.
would have been, going through it. But certainly knowing it, and being a child of a dad who had been in Vietnam, and kind of what that looked like overseas as well as at home.
Yeah. Yeah. I have had the benefit, if you will, of, growing up in a military environment. So friends of the family were military folks, even still. And, so having that experience, and then working at the VA, and, having already that background of knowing, some of the military jargon and what life is like in the military, I was able to relate to that. And then, a lot of our officers are military or former military. So, that's given me a perspective too, that the my experiences in law enforcement, having been involved in critical incidents myself, having lost coworkers in the line of duty, having lost coworkers to suicide, um, you know, having been on the scenes of officer involved shootings where officers were shot, and managing all the things that come along with that, with the educational background, with my love of an experience in the FOP, kind of put me in this place. And to kind of taking a step further about how the FOP got to where we are now with the things that we're doing. The FOP has a number of committees that do work within the FOP on a range of things. The Wellness Committee is just one of those committees. Previously, until a few years ago, our organization has mostly been labor and legislative support for law enforcement. So, we are that arm that sometimes advocates for labor rights. We, lobby legislatures to, affect legislation that affects law enforcement. But wellness was just a committee, among all the other committees that we have, whether that's, we have a committee that looks at border safety and security. We have a committee that looks at, pension systems, all of these things that the FOP does. And wellness was just one of those things. And then we had an opportunity as a wellness committee, and I became the chair of that committee. Now, at the time, I was still a working police officer and, was just appointed to be the chair of that committee. And we had an opportunity to do a survey. And there's a long backstory behind how that came about, but we did this in conjunction with NBC affiliates in New York City, and the survey turned out to be a very big deal, much bigger than we knew. This is going to be really cool. We're going to be able to, learn some things about what our members are going through. We're going to be able to, but our objective on the wellness committee with doing the survey was to find out where cops were getting services, if they were using services, if they weren't using them, why weren't they using them, and to fill in those gaps. Because as the FOP, I knew intuitively from being a police officer and being in that environment that cops don't ask for help. I know they don't ask for help because they don't trust that it's going to be confidential. I knew all that intuitively from being in law enforcement. I know that lots of cops, for example, I'll give you an easy one. When I was working through my career, I saw a number of coworkers go through officer-involved shootings. Either they were shot or they shot someone or, something like that. Most of those officers, within a year or two of their incident, left law enforcement. And so I knew, this is taking a huge toll on people. These kinds of things take a toll on people. I knew, the way that my personality had changed over the course of my law enforcement career. And I'm like, yeah, but nobody's using certain, and I knew why they weren't. But I wanted the survey. I wanted to do this survey to find out what other people would say. If they all are saying the same things that I'm already feeling. And lo and behold, the survey did say that.
You're accurate.
So, we learned in the FOP what we could do because we're not affiliated. We're not tied to a chief. We're not tied to an administration. We're not, we are independent of every law enforcement organization. And we're in a unique place because of that we can provide services that an officer might trust to use, that it won't affect their career.
When we had set up, or when I had set up the cop line, I had legislated, for another law enforcement line. So this is my second law enforcement line, and the key for cop line was truly confidentiality, which meant you're not pinging phones, you're not tracing calls, and knowing damn well that our training was phenomenal, and that people that call hotlines don't typically die by suicide. We statistically know that. So that we have trained that we're at 51%. If they call that line, I'll take 51% because the ambivalence is there. But if they don't call, we're not at 51%. So being able to say, we are a non-rescue line. We are not pinging your phones. We're not sending rescue. We are going to sit in that hole with you as long as we need to. And that, and it's not just for suicide because the belief is if we can grab them with low hanging fruit, and we're starting to see it. So now they call back a year, 2 years later. Hey, I called, last year, now I've got this, much greater thing going on, but they realize nobody called, nobody told my department, it didn't get back to anybody. So really being so mindful of that, and then being able to get those culturally competent therapists. And that's one of the things that we're all kind of grabbing. And, Copland will work with you guys because this takes, it's, the old adage, it takes a village. Oh, it takes more than a village.
Yeah.
And the importance of that is just phenomenal, because jack of all trades, master of none was never our goal. We're a friggin' hotline. We just stay in one lane. That's it. But so important to be able to hand off to other people and say, you know what? Have you considered a mental health professional? You've got so much going on. We have vetted people, that are culturally competent in this area. It's just phenomenal to be able to do that, and to truly try and plug in holes that we know exist, and understanding it's not just hypervigilance, it is the reality of their worlds.
Yeah.
We can't promise them that if their chiefs find out that they're getting mental health services, that they're not going to be sent for a fitness for duty.
Yeah.
And yet, I know, mostly Jersey based, but I have a pretty good pulse on California and Texas at this point. But knowing that when they send them for a fitness for duty, the fact that they're in counseling is really looked very favoritively,
Yeah.
rather than anything. It is just that fear.
Yeah.
And that fear is literally killing them. So knowing that there is an organization as large as the FOP that gets it on so many different levels. I have heard the word resiliency ad nauseum, because that is the latest buzzword.
Yeah.
But you obviously were resilient when you came on the job. Like, if
Yeah,
you
right.
didn't have that. So we've now just, we've given a nice word that people like to fund and hear, or what have you, but we continue to recreate the wheel. I think the most important part about resiliency is, how did you become resilient? So here's what we know. You have survived every worst day of your life. How did you do that? What was the worst day, and how did you do that? Because that is resiliency. So if we can grab from there and we can train on them becoming more aware of truly the inner resources they've had, because the profile of a cop is typically somebody who's grown up in crisis, does well in crisis, doesn't know how to live without crisis, somebody who has issues with a father figure or significant loss early in life, somebody who has history of abuse, emotional, physical, um, sexual, or neglect. It makes for a great cop. It makes for a difficult home life.
Mm.
But if you can grab from that, then I really do think we're going to be able to start impacting on those suicide rates that are just so difficult, because those are the ones we can stop.
Yeah.
Those line of duties. I hate saying that's the known is you could die. I don't think
Right.
I think it's in their head, not their heart. I think they kind of know it,
Right.
but that suicide piece, that's the piece where you feel like, I can do something here. What can I do? What are these pieces? And I feel like the FOP is doing just that. They're looking at this on both a breadth and a depth level, and being able to allocate resources, and not a FOP might have money. There's just not millions of dollars that we get to plug into wellness or what have you. It's there's so much going on. I mean, legislation right now with
Yeah.
with the shift in societal issues, there's only so much that anybody can do. But the understanding, and then you guys being able to connect with organizations, and I know you guys have been wonderful with Copline, but to be able to truly vet
Mm.
the organizations to make sure that they're congruent with what your mission is.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing worse than putting up a resource and finding out that they aren't doing what you think that they're doing, that they're transferring lines to a service at night, or I know for us there's a whole big thing we wanted to set up texting. We've got over 100 volunteers and all different backgrounds, And one of the volunteers came back and said, I will not participate in texting. I was on enough wires, and said, under the Fourth Amendment, these officers' phones are going to be taken. They will then be able to read every text to Copline. We didn't go to texting. So it's again, because truly the road to hell is paved by good intentions.
Yeah.
The one thing that I'm smart enough to know is I'm not smart. So before I do something,
I don't agree, but okay.
I got a
you,
real.
you know what you don't know, though, right?
Yeah. I got a slice of pie. You know, give me a good sweet on top, I'm good. But keep going past that. Like I always say, families suck. It's family therapy. Kids, don't bring your kids to me. I got one slice. So, but being able to put it out to over 100 people that we have vetted, that we have put through our training, that have had experiences beyond, incredible to get the feedback, because they've got the pulse on stuff that we didn't think about. They have the blind side. So is, this was great. And I know that teen lines are doing texting. They're getting a ton of texts. I cannot inadvertently put a cop in harm's way and then say, well, I didn't know. It was my responsibility before I launched something to know. It's my responsibility before we authorize anything to go on the website. Are they really doing what they say they're doing? Because otherwise they're going to go back and they're going to say, I got this off your website. I trusted your website, and cops don't trust.
Yeah.
Yeah. What?
Yeah, that's crucial. That the confidence and the confidentiality pieces are crucial. And I think, we have obviously a number of projects and programs that we're building now in wellness in the FOP, with wellness becoming now our third pillar of our organization, along with labor and legislative. We are, one of the things that I say repeatedly, that is not so much of a project or program that we're building to fill in those gaps, is that we want to make it our goal to maintain a conversation about wellness constantly, because that's one way that we're going to break down stigma that still remains. I mean, we've gotten away, among professionals in this arena, from talking about stigma. We all know it's there, but it's still present. In order to continue to break it down, we have to talk about wellness, talk about how important it is, talk about paying attention to it, talk about normalizing calling a hotline. If, like you said, if they call Copline and nobody comes after them after a year, that builds confidence. And then cops talk to each other. I always say, I was sitting on a panel maybe a year ago, a panel of experts, and they're talking about, how to get cops to buy in, and how cops, to take some of these strategies that we're building and use them. And, and I say, you guys are forgetting one thing, is that cops ask other cops for advice. So let's say, first of all, there's a million social media groups out there that are just for law enforcement. There's groups on Facebook that you can only be a member of if you're in law enforcement. They can verify that you're in law enforcement. Guys will get on there and ask for who cuts your grass. I mean, and if they're going to ask for, advice, they're going to ask a buddy who they trust that's been through it. And so, we want to make sure in the FOP that we are able to provide that from somebody that they trust. So when we start to vet programs or practitioners, or, we started with inpatient treatment facilities, even before we had a wellness division, the wellness committee was vetting inpatient treatment facilities. So, right now we have 4 that we have MOUs with. And because this is a time-consuming process, what we're doing, because when we vet a facility, and it's going to follow with individual practitioners and other wellness programs that are out there, because they're coming out of the woodwork everywhere now, we have a thorough vetting process that we go to. So, for example, for an inpatient facility, we physically go there. We tour the facility, every nook and cranny and corner. We talk to clients that are at the facility out of the presence of staff. If we're not allowed to talk to them out of the presence of staff, that's a red flag to us. If staff feel like they have to hover over while we talk to a client about their experience in that facility, that's an issue for us, because we want an honest appraisal from that officer or other first responder of what kind of experience they're having in the program. So by doing that, we are identifying those facilities and programs that we know are quality, and making sure that we follow up with people who go through the program or see that practitioner or provider to see what their experience was. Because, like you said, we don't want to recommend something. We did the same thing with Copline. I mean, somebody on our committee called Copline and went through a whole vetting process with Copline. And so, we found that Copline was fantastic, so we recommend Copline.
But that's what you need to do. And I always say, when I lecture, I'm like, for God's sakes, don't believe me. I founded the damn thing. I'm the director. Don't believe me. Call it. Call it at weird hours. When you wake up for the male piss, if you're over 40, call it then. You want to know, who's at these off hours and what's going on, because that's really vetting.
Yeah.
That's doing true due diligence, and that's imperative.
Yeah. Another thing that we've been able to do because of our structure is we can go to, so I'm one person. Even the guys on my committee don't know all the corners, over the country and what practitioners are out there. So we're going to our state lodges and our local lodges and saying, if you know a practitioner or a program or a provider in your area that you think is quality, that has that expertise in working with law enforcement, let us know who they are, so that the committee can take a look, and the committee can go through our vetting process and put them on this directory that we're building of services. And when this directory is complete, and a cop will be able to go to the directory, find resources in their area, and be able to use those and trust that they've been vetted, and that they're going to be quality, and that they're going to be culturally competent in this area.
So huge. When we do the applications for retirees who are potentially going to be answering the lines, it pretty in depth. And one of the questions is, have you ever seen a mental health provider, and would you recommend that person? And then that's one of the ways that we then start to vet who it is. And it's also a way that we vet our retirees, because if we have a retiree that has never sought counseling, and then so I'm the first kind of line that of vetting, they'll call them up and address it. And if I've got people that do not believe in counseling, it's going to be too heavy of a lift. That's not going to be a good fit for Copline, because they bring that bias in with them.
Right.
So it really is looking at just a whole lot of different layers, because not everybody, unfortunately, that goes through training ends up on the lines. They just, they don't. Their heart's in the right place. Amazing men and women, just being able to get the active listening skills and the amount and the shift that has to take place of what they've done their whole careers, which is give advice.
Yeah.
That can no longer do that. So pretty interesting. You had been involved in, really, from just what you were quickly kind of rattling off, probably some of the most stressful and difficult incidents. In looking back on your law enforcement career, what was the worst day you had on the job?
I think, to be honest, it's the day I think that I realized that we're mortal. And you go into law enforcement, especially as a young person. I was 22 years old when I started, and you don't really have a sense of how quickly your life could be taken, and under what circumstances, or just how bad things can be. And so what happened is I had some coworkers who were involved in an incident with an armed suspect, and there was someone being held hostage. The hostage managed to escape, but they ended up confronting this armed suspect in the corridor of a residence, and in the dark. And one officer fired and killed the armed suspect. But in doing so, one of his rounds ricocheted and hit his partner, and also killed his partner. So that was sort of a wake up call for me. Like, that could have been me. And many times over my career, I was, when you're a law enforcement officer, you're in a dangerous situation. You're not fearful in the situation because you don't have time to be. You have to react. You have to, you have to do your job. It's only after it's over that you sit back and you go, wow, that could have really gone differently. And that's when it starts to screw with your head a little bit, because you realize you could have been killed. You could have, but for the grace of God go I, lots of things could have been different. You could have been the one that had to pull the trigger and take someone's life.
How many years at that point were you into your career?
That was 2 years. It's 2 years into my career. And, so I think of that worst day. I say it's both a blessing and a curse. I think the way that I viewed the job changed at that point, but it had both good and bad outcomes. I mean, I think it made me much more aware of my own mortality, but it also made me a lot more careful. It made me, I think, a better cop, because I was more tactically sound after that. I think I was more realistic about what the job was. When you're brand new and you don't see anything like that for a while, like I can't imagine, going a whole career and not going through something like that. I mean, it's great. It's a great, safe career if you can. But in a way, I feel fortunate that and maybe this is just my mindset. In a way, I feel fortunate that I went through that early in my career, because I think it prepared me for all of the other times that would happen to me, during my career. Not that same incident, but, the loss of someone, because that was a double whammy for our agency. It was, a really, 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 really good cop involved in a really bad situation. And, fortunately, he got the support he needed, had a stellar career after that, and retired when he could, still has a stellar life, has gone on to a second career, fared very well, but that could have, had he not had adequate support, it could have taken a different turn for him.
Easily.
Watching him go through that anguish, and then also losing a coworker in the line of duty at the same time, that was really a double whammy. And so, and forget about, the rest of us. I wasn't at the call. I wasn't, but the impact of realizing what they had gone through and being able to, empathize with what they might be going through. I think it really, it prepared me, I think, for a lot of, what was to come throughout my career, losing coworkers and, seeing people go through that. But yeah, I guess that's probably the best answer I can give you.
The best day on the job.
Oh, best day. Good. I would say when I left. No, I'm kidding. I was just kidding. Best day. Oh, good question. There were lots of great days. I think there's different kinds of best days. So, maybe the best day career wise is the day I finally got promoted to lieutenant, because I tried a couple times and that was a goal of mine. But I'm sure that there were hundreds of best days where I felt like I made a difference and an impact on somebody's life, whether it be big or small, being able to change the outcome of something that was negative and turn it into a positive outcome. And, one thing I say is that I'm not sure if it's age but I've often said that I think the job took my memory. I can't remember a lot of things that I did over the course of my 20 something year career, and, good and bad. But I know many times, I went out and worked, and sometimes worked a really long, hard shift, but felt good at the end of it, even though I was exhausted, because I felt like I had done something positive.
If we get to look in a crystal ball and it's 5 years from now, what are you hoping to see on a national FOP basis and your role there? What's the lay of the land?
Oh my God, I have so
Given our,
many, so many
given
hopes
our
and dreams
current
for
climate
this.
and everything, what does that? What's five
Yeah,
years from?
yeah. So, well, the two projects that we're working on should be completed well before that. So, one that we have the approved provider bulletin up and available on our website, so that's a directory that will be able to be used 24/7, 365 for officers out there. Two, that we have completed, we're developing standardized peer support curriculum in cooperation with the Department of Justice. So that's going to be a standardized peer support program so that when you get that training, you are stamped peer supporter, trained peer supporter. So, and it's going to be, like a national certification. So, my hope is that we have a large number of people trained in that curriculum within 5 years, and we got lots of certified peer supporters out there. So that because what we're going to do is, as we deliver that training, which is going to be called Power and Peers, we are going to create a network of peer supporters around the country. So, Stephanie, you probably know that even though an agency might have peer support, officers still may not be confident in their own agency's peer support, especially if it's a small place, because they might still be fearful that, Joe or Sally is going to have a couple beers and spill.
Right.
So,
And
if we create this national network and we are able to say, that this peer in Colorado is trained in Power and Peers, then this officer in need in Connecticut can call Colorado and know that they're going to be understood, know that they're speaking to someone trained, and know that that person isn't going to go back to their agency in Connecticut and, have a few and spill. Now, we would hope, obviously, that nobody would ever do that anyway, but it would eliminate the fear if they could go to that resource. And then with the approved provider bulletin at the ready, that trained peer supporter in Colorado has resources to tell the person in Connecticut that they can go to.
that's it's great. I mean, one of the things that I know that we have wanted is to be able to have a list of peer supports that somebody can actually see face to face. Because for us, that's not, you will never meet your caller,
Sure.
no matter what the circumstances. So, but being able to then, hand them off to a peer that's still active or what have you, that would be such a gift to be able to connect
Oh,
on
yeah.
that level. You
One other
guys are
thing I
doing,
want to add too is, it's heartening to me to see entities come together. So us, Copline, FOP, any other entities out there that are working together to build resources. So, for example, when we build the approved provider bulletin, we're going to share with you what we have. Hopefully you'll share with us what
of course.
will the profession will work together to build those resources so that it's not just FOP, it's all of us.
There is no ego in this. I mean, there is there's no winner. As long as
Right.
we have suicides, there's no winner. As long as we have officers, there are no winners.
Right.
It is about every one of us doing the right thing, not the easy thing, the right thing. The other thing that the FOP might need to get involved with on the peer side is the different laws that govern different states. Because if that peer is engaging in domestic violence, drug use, or what have you, if the officer is, that peer has a potential for having to do something. And it's one of the reasons why on Copline they're all retired officers. That was the reason why,
Yeah.
is to eliminate the conflict. So, and it's also why mental health professionals are not answering the lines, because if somebody is suicidal, that also. So
Right.
there's just a lot of movable parts that needed to be looked at and understood. And again, you're doing such a phenomenal job. It's that road to hell that's paved by good intentions. That, truly, whatever we can do, whatever any resources we have from legal on down that we've had to deal with, that we can help you guys with, by all means, because it is about all of us figuring this out together.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not about who gets into what magazine, who gets ignited. It's not about any of that.
You're
We're
right.
all gonna die one day. We're all, this is what have we
You're
left
right.
behind?
Mhm.
Have we left the world a little bit better? And when I go before, my maker, do I get to say, I have used everything that you gave me, and I have left it all behind for everybody else to use. Because that really, and I'll tell you, Beverly Anderson from Metropolitan PD does EAP. She's absolutely somebody that you should get in touch with, because they have absolutely figured out how to do it right. They have a 27% usage rate, which is
That is
incredible.
great. That is
Yeah.
great.
Um, but she's the most giving woman, and that's her thing, is that any resource she has, it is her duty to make sure that it's left behind. Their contract is paid for by the union. It is a $650,000 negotiated contract so that she can hire a therapist or what have you. So when we're off the air, I'll give you
Please do. Yeah. That's key. I see, to the chiefs and administrators out there, I say all the time, work with your unions. Don't work against them, work with them.
absolutely. Is there anything that I haven't covered that you wanted to talk about that you would hope to be able to get out?
Yeah. Actually, there is. I'll give a shameless plug here. The FOP is building the agenda now for our second FOP National Wellness Summit. It's going to take place in Nashville, Tennessee, February 8th and 9th. So mark those dates on your calendar. Information's starting to come out about registration now. We are working on building the agenda. I can tell you that it's going to consist of a few keynote speakers. There's going to be some breakout educational sessions on a number of different wellness topics, everything from somebody who's just beginning to set up wellness services within their agency to people who have been doing it for a while that are looking to gain some extra knowledge. And then there's going to be some panel discussions with peer support programs that are already in place successfully in some agencies, and some police psychologists that we're going to ask about things that happen, what therapy looks like, because I think there's a big question mark out there for a lot of people who, might think, listen, therapy, even if you're not having problems, is probably good for you. So,
Right.
but I think there's a big question mark for a lot of people about, what's it going to look like when am I going to be laying on a couch? What's it?
Exactly.
And so things like that, talking about that to demystify some of the things that keep people from getting the help that they need. So put it on your calendar.
It, on the calendar, I just wrote it down. So thank you for your time. Thank you for doing a career that I couldn't do. Thank you for continuing to
Oh,
give. Um, really, just truly amazing, and
thank you.
keep doing what you're doing, because you make a difference. And I have loved over the past few years watching the ground that you
Thanks.
guys are making, and the reputation you have. It's
Proud of the
beautiful.
FOP. FOP is
So
where it's at.
great, truly exceptional. So thank you. And
Thanks,
then
Stephanie.
you're very welcome. And next weekend on Steph Therapy 911 with Stephanie Samuels, I'm going to have Janice McCarthy, who heads up COPS, which is Care of Police Suicide Survivors. She's got an amazing organization, but they do a fundraiser every year for children to sponsor a child of an officer who has died by suicide for the holidays. So I wanted to bring her back on to discuss that, and continue talking about solutions to problems. So anyway, take care, and I will see you next week.